Welcome to Tripping Over the Ottoman. I'm David Van Deusen, here with my co-host, Abby.
And if you're new to our podcast, welcome. David and I are two super fans from totally different generations that take a deep dive into episodes of the one thing that unites us.
And that is the Dick Van Dyke Show.
Now, Halloween is just around the corner, so we thought today we'd all take a look together at one of the spookiest episodes of the series called The Ghost of a Chantz. And we're going to be talking about special effects and horror movie genres influence on the show and Vincent Price, and it's going to be a really fun one.
One of my favorite episodes, for sure. This was a season 4 episode, episode 2 of season 4, written by Bill Persky and Sam Denoff. The idea for this episode actually came from Sam's son, Doug.
I had no idea. Very cool.
So let's hear Doug tell us about how it came to be.
I actually wasn't there for the filming of Ghost of a Chantz, but it was my idea. I guess I was 7 years old, and we were at home one night, and Dad was reading to me from the Golden Book Encyclopedia, which was a pretty common thing that kids had. And he happened to be reading from the book about ghosts. And I was fascinated, and I said, Daddy, why don't you do a show about ghosts? And so he thought about it, and then next thing I knew, he and Persky had written this wonderful episode that was really a fun way to go with ghosts and a good surprise ending at the end.
That is so cool. Love that.
The show, directed by Jerry Paris, our guy, written on May 20th, 1964, filmed on August 11th, 1964, and aired in September 20, 1964. So, we talk about it's coming up here on Halloween, but it doesn't seem like they considered it a Halloween episode.
Yes, I noticed that too. Yeah, it was just a little bit too early.
Yeah.
And I will say something about the Persky and Denoff writing team there is that I think at this point in season 4, we're so far into the show, the characters are so developed. These two writers are so in tune with the show and what Carl envisioned. I think they're the only ones who could have really handled this sort of like weird mix of like the spooky genre and the sitcom together. I think other sitcoms at the time have done that, and they're not effective because the characters act in strange ways that aren't authentic, and that gets lost in the spooky part, and you lose the characters. Where I think here, they knew them so well. They could write so well for the show that all the characters are at their exactly how they would normally act, but just in this different situation. I think that says something about their writing quality.
I agree. I particularly enjoy Maury Amsterdam's performance in this. We'll talk about that as we go. I have a few synopses, so let me see what I have, and then you can share with what you have. Mine say, after a mix-up by Mel for reservations at a lodge, Rob, Laura, Sally, and Buddy are forced to spend a frightening night in a cabin that has not been used in years and is rumored to be haunted.
That's a good one.
What do you have?
I have Rob, Laura, Sally, and Buddy spend a frightening night in a haunted cabin at a mountain resort.
That's good, too. And then I have Rob and Laura share an unsettling night in a haunted cabin with Buddy and Sally.
Okay, I have one long one to end it. Alan has invited Mel, Rob, Laura, Buddy, and Sally to a fishing lodge for a working weekend. After a mix-up by Mel for reservations at a lodge, they all spend the night in a seemingly haunted cabin. Last occupant of that cabin, the wealthy Amos Chantz, disappeared without a trace, and strange things start happening all around them once they're inside. Though scared, they decide to stay, but the ghost, quote unquote, may have other things on his mind, as one by one the cabin inhabitants start disappearing, leaving the last of the 4 to deal with the ghost of Amos Chantz on his own. That's pretty involved.
Well, that's not a synopsis. That's just about, we don't need to watch the episode.
I know, I was just saying, that's just an outline of what happened. Can I just say, this episode, you said it's one of your favorites, David. This show, I probably watched it when I was, 6, and it used to scare the pants off of me, like legitimately, especially the part with, and we'll get into it later, the fire starting by itself and the music. For some reason, that one just took me out. Like, I was terrified. But I think it had chalked it up to, the plot within a plot, like the kind of camera, that was confusing to a young person, and also just hadn't seen something like that. But now as an adult, I absolutely love it. And I just think it's a riot.
When fans talk about this episode, they share similar memories as you, is that, I was very scared as a kid, right?
Yeah, it was very effective. Yeah.
We'll talk about the effects, later where they appear in the episode, but I think pretty cool for the 1960s and a live being done in front of a live audience.
Oh yeah, absolutely. You forget that it's live. Yeah, that's like another element. Yeah. So David and I have the privilege of being able to look at an early draft of the script. And I've noted there that Alan Brady, Carl Reiner, was originally listed as being in the episode, but it is crossed out on this draft. So somehow they had him involved and decided maybe it wasn't fitting to the show or what. But I thought that was really interesting.
And we'll talk about where Alan would have appeared had he been in the show, because we do know that from this version of the script. This episode features a few very interesting bit players. We have the owner of the lodge himself, right? We have the cameraman who's the guy sneaking around, and we have the caretaker of the room. We'll talk about each of those folks as they make their appearance in the episode. Each very unique in their roles and fun at the same time, I think.
Yeah, they had a lot of fun to it. The first scene of the episode, we open up, we're in a new environment we haven't seen before. It is the lobby of some kind of fishing lodge. There's, animals on the wall, animal skins hanging, very woodsy feeling. David, correct me if I'm wrong here, but is this the cabin set just dressed up like the lobby? Because it's the exact same setup. We have like the couch in the front, but this time it's covered with an animal skin. Then you have the table behind it where like the phone would have been. And then the door would have been almost in the same place. There's a fireplace in the same place. I'm wondering if they just redressed it for that opening bit. I'm not sure.
I do think I took note of that couch covered up. I think covered up so we didn't recognize it.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think we'll let the listeners decide, but you go back and look at those sets and see what you think.
Yeah, it's very similar.
We meet Mr. Little, who was played by actor Maurice Brenner. Interestingly, his only Dick Van Dyke Show appearance was in Ghost of a Chantz. A well-known actor, he did 132 episodes of Phil Silvers,
where he interestingly played alongside Alan Melvin, who is another character, played Harrison B. Harding and some other characters on the show here.
Brenner also did 5 episodes of Car 54, Where Are You? So certainly an actor in his own right.
Yeah, and I was actually surprised he didn't play more sort of like the ghoulish type of character, because I found his sort of 30 years, like his sort of monster voice was really like on point. So I was wondering, I'm like, man, he did that so well. I'm wondering why he didn't have more roles like that.
The group arrives, it says, in the Catskills, which I'm outside of Albany, New York. So the Catskills are in my backyard. Didn't they say it took 5 hours in the car?
Yeah, 5 hours in bumper to bumper traffic.
It must have been the bumper to bumper traffic, because
it's not
even
that far.
Between New York City to Albany is about 2 3/4 to 3 hours, depending on the traffic. So it must have been a horrible traffic day from the city to get up.
That has them all complaining, that there was this bumper to bumper traffic, and they're hungry, they're tired, and Sally says something about not being outdoorsy. They're not thrilled with this whole thing. And, Rob's trying to remind him like, hey, this is a free weekend. And he's kind of telling the audience some exposition there, like Alan's asked us to come up here and work on a show together. And it's a free weekend in the mountains kind of thing.
Yeah. And I love Laura's line, Sally, you're just not an outdoor girl. Sally says, I'm a charter member of the Girl Scouts, which prompts then Buddy to say, well, do you have any Girl Scout cookies?
So Rob goes to check in, thinking that everything's fine, and they all take a seat kind of on the couch. And Rob goes to check into the front desk, and that's where we meet Maurice Brenner, who is playing, I think Mr. Little is his name in the episode. And he tells him, "Yeah, we're here to check in." And there's a confusion because he's like, "Well, Mel and Alan already checked in already, Mr. Brady." And he says, "Well, no, there's supposed to be 3 rooms. Me and my wife and Sally and Buddy." And he said, well, there's no rooms and there's no reservations for anybody. And the creepiness starts to begin.
And I like the way Little says his line, and specifically written this way. Nobody made no reservations.
Yes.
Nobody made no reservations. An interesting dialogue.
Very. They were not thrilled to begin with, and now they're really not thrilled.
So there must be some mistake. Where's Mel? Right?
Yeah.
So all of a sudden, Rob gets Mel on the phone, and Mel's coming up and
with knee socks and like some sort of cravat, which I was dying laughing. So good.
Is where for the fishing lodge, right? Yeah. And Rob says, Mel, there's no reservations. How could you make a mistake like that? And Buddy, of course, says it's heredity. Look at the mistake his parents made. It's just sort of laying the foundation.
Yeah. Even when you don't know what you're doing, it comes out wrong. Or so is that what he says? It comes out stupid.
Mel says, girls, why don't you go to dinner and we'll try to figure this out.
And I'll say Mel's little monologue, like, well, Rob, we were in New York and then we were coming up here and, Alan had one of those terrible, are you sure there's no rooms? Like when he gets a chance to shine, he really like milks it. It's so good.
Deacon is good. So finally, Buddy's going to join the girls. And this is one of the great scenes that I always laugh at. Buddy says, Mel, you finally accomplished a great feat. You got everybody hating you at the same time. And he's standing there under like the mounted head of a deer. And he looks at it and points at Mel, attack.
That's so good.
Which was not in the early draft of the script.
Right, which you can't even imagine the episode without it now, Perfect.
Whether Maury ad-libbed it and they kept it in or not, but it's perfect.
Very possible.
Perfect.
Yeah. So then Rob and Mel are left in the lab. I've gone to dinner to kind of chill out a little bit. And Rob and Mel are left to kind of work it out with Mr. Little to figure out where they're going to stay because they've driven all this way. They're supposed to be here. So Mel starts to kind of bribe Mr. Little with some cash. And this little interaction takes place where little by little, Mel is, giving bribes, giving $1 here, $1 there. And Mr. Little starts revealing more and more information that there might be some place to stay, but it's got some problems. Okay, more cash. Well, the problems are not, it's just on and on. And they find out that there's a cabin. It's been vacant for 3 years. It's got the sleeping arrangements that'll work out for them. A bedroom, fold away couch for the guys. And he says, but there's just one final problem.
And Mel tries to give him some more money and say, "Will this take care of the problem?" And he says, I don't think so. He says, the cabin is haunted.
And there's this very creepy laugh. And then the spooky music, which becomes a character of itself in this episode. You know what I mean? It so sets the tone and the mood so well. It creates all the crescendos. I mean, it's so interesting.
And goes to commercial break and sort of leaves us hanging.
Yes, totally.
We return from commercial and Rob says to Little, well, what kind of haunted? Like ghosts and chains and all that stuff.
And that weird like UFO noise he does.
Yeah. Right? Dick's just impeccable. Little says, well, nobody has slept a full night in that cabin in 3 years. And I love how he says 3, that the roll off.
Perfect. I know. I really thought I was going to find his list of movies and it was all going to be like Dracula type. Wasn't at all, but he's perfect at it. So Rob says he doesn't believe in ghosts. And I feel like that's a big foreshadowing for the episode, which is that Rob is going to waffle between very brave and very chicken because he's trying to be brave, but it's going to go back and forth quite a bit. So he's giving us a little foreshadowing there.
Little says Amos Chantz went to bed and the next day he was gone. Folks say he was murdered for his money, but they never found it or him. The foundation is really being laid for what's about to come.
So Rob says to Mr. Little, okay, we'll take the cabin, but don't tell the ladies what you told me. And at that moment, Buddy enters. He says, tell the ladies what? And Rob under his breath sort of says, listen, we got a cabin for the night. And Buddy goes, and you don't want to tell the girls? Which I thought was great. He says, no, I don't want to frighten them because the guy says there's this local legend about the cabin being haunted. And here's where we get Buddy's, like you're saying, Maury's. He's starting it right now, and it's going to devolve to hilarity later on. He's immediately chicken. He's immediately like, this is not for me. He says, I agree. We shouldn't tell the girls. He grabs his suitcases, heads for the door.
Rob says, where are you going? Back to New York.
Remember, don't tell the girls. So we get to see Buddy's frame of mind that will just continue to provide tons of comedy as the episode continues. He's just a huge scaredy cat.
The cabin door opens. And we get our first look at what their accommodations will look like. Rosemary's first line, Sally's first line upon entering, looking around, she says, what time do we feed the wolves? I thought,
that's the best.
How did they think of these lines?
I don't know. That's a wonderful one. So they're checking it all out. They're checking out the bedroom. And the girls go to check out the bedroom they're going to be in. And Rob's by himself in the living room. And we see, like, where's Buddy at? Where the heck's Buddy? And so Rob goes to the door, Buddy, get out of the car, come in here. So we know Buddy's in the car, just sort of like holding tight, he's like scared to come in. And he says, I'm going to stay here in the car and sleep in the back seat.
And Rob says,
oh yeah, alone?
Alone, yeah.
Already terrified. They're not even in the cabin yet. So great.
So Buddy's skittish about being alone. You hear the car door shut. He comes in the cabin and he's startled by Rob, who closes the door behind him, right? Rob's putting the fishing pole behind the door and comes in and Buddy can't see him. And then they scared each other from being behind the door.
Well, and then his thoughts already are running away. He's like, where are the girls? Somebody stole the girls. Like he's already at level 100, Like, which is kind of a weird foreshadowing because people do start to disappear as the episode goes on here. So
Mel comes out of the bedroom, having gone and shown Sally and Laura where the bedroom was, and lets Rob know that, Alan wants to start shooting the next morning at what, 8 or 9 a.m.?
I think it's 8 a.m., which puts in an interesting time element because we get the sense that they're up kind of far on a mountain or was it by a lake or mountain? I can't remember, but I think was it by the lake?
I think so.
So they're far from the lodge, and the kind of like main hub of the resort. So they're far away. And then he says, well, we're going to send a Jeep for you at 8 a.m., which is kind of puts this nice, time element on where they're kind of sitting ducks until 8 a.m. when that Jeep comes, like,
right.
So that sets up a cool parameter there.
Mel leaves and Rob turns to Buddy and says, Buddy, will you please go get the rest of the stuff out of the car? And Buddy says, would you go with me?
He says, fine, I'll get it myself.
And Buddy says, well, then can I go with you?
So cute.
Maury is just perfect.
He's just perfect, such a teddy bear, He's trying everything just not to be left alone, outside or inside. So they open the door to leave for outside, and instead of it being nothing outside the door, there's a very spooky guy standing there holding a big bundle of wood.
Looks like it's the caretaker of the cabin. In the draft of the early script that we have, let me read you how this scene was originally written to play out. It says, Rob opens the door to leave, revealing the back of a tall man with a beard and hat, who falls backwards through the door and lands on the floor. The man's arms are full of wood, which fall on top of him and over the room. And Rob's like, holy cow. Buddy yelps and heads for the bedroom and bumps into Laura, Sally, and Mel, who run out of the bedroom on hearing the scream. Now,
interestingly, Mel is still there.
Mel is still there in this original draft. And Laura says, well, what happened? And Buddy says, it's them. And Rob is bending over the man to help him. And, they're back and forth. And, they're like, what's going on, right? This whole scene is entirely different as it played out in the final episode.
At some point, Buddy ends up clutching Rob and going, it's a dead guy. And Rob's like, he's not dead. And they're all, going back and forth, yelling. Rob's finally like, Buddy, will you shut up? They get up the man. So it's completely different. There's a whole kind of slapstick element in the original draft, which is interesting. And not that spooky, I would say, either.
They elected, for some reason, to just have the man standing there, like looming in the doorway.
Which is creepier, yeah.
And Rob looks at him and says, oh, sorry, I didn't know you were there. And the man says, I didn't know you was here. I always bring the firewood at 9 o'clock. Buddy and Rob are spooked out. Laura and Sally are still in the bedroom at this point.
And this man at the door holding the firewood is a character actor named Milton Parsons. And so we'll talk a little bit about him here. He was acted for like 40 years. He's appeared in over 160 TV and film productions, which is like, whoa. And you probably have seen him at some point. The Twilight Zone, he's in it multiple times. I know him strangely from an episode of The Brady Bunch where he plays a teacher in an episode. Really? Yeah. And I thought, could that be him? And I took a look, and it is. He looks a little bit different, but his character's a kind of a little bit creepy too in that episode. And he was usually cast in roles, but usually even creepier, morticians, coroners, sort of like mad doctor type stuff.
His facial expressions were great. His laugh was particularly ghoulish.
Yes.
This was his only Dick Van Dyke appearance. As you say, he had career going back to the 1940s. He was also on the Wild Wild West and Little House on the Prairie. I'll have to go look for him on the Brady Bunch, though, that you mentioned.
It's a weird one.
See how that was, yeah.
Now, I read also that he was under contract at MGM for a point, but then started to freelance across all the studios because he was in such sort of like demand as these sort of bit parts, which I thought was kind of cool.
Oh, yeah.
Here, we get the music changing, too, with this incoming guy, and it just really sets the tone. Things are getting spooky. Does he have a name in the episode, Milton Parsons? Is a spooky guy with the firewood? I don't know. Caretaker? Maybe it's called Caretaker.
Just the caretaker, I think, of the cabin. Yeah.
When he says, I'll always bring the firewood at a hot, and he checks he's not even wearing a watch. So I didn't know if that was just a costume error or if that was supposed to be extra creepy. Like, well, what is he looking at? Kind of ghostly. I didn't know, but.
Yeah, I'm thinking that's creepy.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, I always bring it at 9 o'clock. Yeah. Like you said, there's nothing there.
So good.
So Rob and Buddy say, well, who are you bringing the wood for? Nobody's been here for 3 years. And the man says, that's right. Nobody's lived here for 3 years. Sleep well.
Yeah, sleep well. That is more evil laughter as he's walking away outside. And Buddy says, did you hear that? And Rob says, what do you mean? This evil laugh. He says, no, he says he's been bringing it for 3 years. And so they kind of have this discussion like, well, where could this wood be going? What's happening? And as they're having this discussion, Rob's suggesting like, well, maybe there's something illegal happening up here and they're using this stuff to scare people off, kind of like Scooby-Doo type thing.
Trying to be as logical as he can. Rob says there should be 3 years of firewood here, right? So if he's bringing it, and you're right, he speculates that the guy's been burning it, or maybe he's doing something illegal, trying to scare people away so they don't find out about it.
And Rob even says, no, there's always some explanation for a ghostly happening. And so he's becoming very logical, trying to ground himself to that always. But as soon as he's finished saying that, second ghostly happening, a fire starts up in the fireplace beside them out of nowhere. And let me tell you, it is spooky. And the music with that fire, oof, terrifying.
The special effect done, this is what, the mid 60s?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Which in today's world, you'd say, oh, the gas fireplace turned on, right? Mm-hmm. But back then, I'm thinking probably done in a similar way. Who knows? I don't know if we'll ever know how they did it.
Yeah. If anyone in the comments has, any familiarity with special effects at that time for TV, especially, let us know, because I'm very curious. I mean, I imagine it's something being ignited by some sort of switch, but it seems that would be pretty ahead of its time if it was sort of a gas switch like that. But I don't know.
Rob, again, trying to stay calm and cool, says there's always a logical explanation for a ghostly happening, and he says, "Oh, cozy."
Puts his hands out, warming them. But Buddy is terrified. I mean, he's like, you can see his face just more and more petrified as the night goes on.
Our scene now fades to a time later in the evening, apparently, where Buddy is still like going around all the cabin, looking at this, looking at that. And Rob says, will you stop acting like Lou Costello and help me with his bed?
Weird little piece of trivia here. Milton Parsons, who was the caretaker, he was actually in an Abbott and Costello film called Hold That Ghost, which I thought was a weird mix of things. I don't know. They're not related, of course, but I was like, oh, Costello, Ghost, Milton Parsons, kind of funny.
That's great. Buddy's trying to open the closet door on the side of the room, only to discover that it's locked. And Rob says, well, do you know why? He says, because there's a monster in there.
He does that monster voice so good. There's a monster in there.
And Rob says they probably have it locked because it's a storeroom and they don't want anybody in there.
They, who's they?
Buddy just can't rationalize any of it.
His paranoia is it's just ratcheting up, yeah.
With that, Laura comes out of the bedroom and sighs, and she totally freaks Buddy out, startles him. Ah! And she said, I'm just coming out to get my makeup case.
Well, what's scary about a makeup case? And Rob's over there hitting himself in the forehead like, Buddy, keep it together. Stop scaring them.
So Laura looks at Rob and she says, Sally says she snores, which at this point, Sally enters wearing a bathrobe and curler, and Buddy really lets out a yell.
And that frilly curler cap, which makes it even more funny, the big frills on top of it. So Buddy shrieks, ah! He says, what's wrong with you? He says, well, all these years working together, I didn't know you look like that. He goes, like what?
Like my wife.
So funny.
Sally says, I'm a little worried about you, Buddy, because you haven't insulted anybody all evening. Even Sally could read that Buddy's a little unnerved and a little bit on edge. This next scene, again, the writing is just so great. Rob accompanies Laura toward the bedroom and asks if she'll see him tomorrow. Rob says, well, I hope so. Rob gives Laura a nice kiss goodnight. With that, Sally and Buddy sort of notice what's going on and look at each other.
Might be the funniest bit in the whole episode, honestly.
Good night, Sal. Good night, pal. And they shake hands.
On the way to the bedroom, Sally looks back depressingly and she just goes, oh, it's a story of my life.
So Rob and Buddy move across the room to the sofa bed, which they've gotten ready, and they lay down on top of the sofa bed. Rob looks over and sees Buddy in his pajamas, but that he also has his shoes on his feet. And he says, are you going to go to bed with your shoes on? And Buddy says, I can't run in my bare feet.
I mean, some truly great lines in this episode. Buddy being scared is hilarious. But Rob assures Buddy that, they've been here the whole evening. Nothing weird or strange has happened. And then he says, well, what about that fire? And Rob's got his rational explanation. Well, it's probably a live ember buried in the coal, And he says, oh, we're a live body buried under the floor.
Rob says, will you turn off the light so we can get some sleep?
Are you kidding?
Rob turns the light off.
Well, he says, I can't sleep with the light on. But I can't sleep with it off.
It's very low key, but Buddy says, I don't know if you noticed, I sure wish I had my teddy bear.
It's great as a character because he's really dishes it out to people all the time, on Mel and everything. But then when he's scared, it's all, he can dish it out, but he can't take it too much, He's very, very fragile when it comes to these things.
So they settle in, and they're only a few seconds laying there, and the light turns on by itself. And Rob, I think, says, right, Buddy, would you turn the light off?
Yeah, he said, well, I didn't turn it on.
if you didn't turn it on, it went on all by itself.
Rob, again, always trying to find this, rational explanation. Well, but you can see he's getting a little bit scared. Like, he's starting to crack through a little bit here, Rob. He's a little, let me take a look at the light. Maybe you can see he's getting a little scared. And he decides, like, well, I didn't have the lamp off all the way.
And Buddy says, what's the logical explanation for the light? A live ember in the dead bulb? Back to the correlation of what's going on in the fire.
So in this next exchange, where there's sort of a rhythm of like the lights going on and off, back and forth, it kind of almost has like a farce feel to it. Things sort of coming and going, and people coming through doors later on, disappearing through doors. So it really sets that mood that it's going to be no holds barred. Wacky things are going to be happening.
So as you say, they lay down and the light goes on, and Rob turns it off, and back on it goes, and back off. So Buddy finally says, "Look, if you don't want them off, we'll leave them on." And as they lay there, the cabin door opens and there's no one there. But you can sort of sense, like, there's the ghost.
There's something there.
Now the rocking chair across the room begins to rock back and forth. After several seconds, the rocking stops. Then the door opens and closes again. The special effects here, very, very well done.
And in the Blu-ray versions specifically, but also on it's certain copies online you can find. You can see some of the wires that are controlling these elements. We have the rocking chair. There's the top of the rocking chair. There's a wire going from the very top rung, back, and then the door. The wire is sort of at the very top of it, from the wall to the door, kind of on the inside where the hinge is, and it kind of pulls it open. And with the Blu-rays, you can really see it. It's very. If anyone's interested, go take a look. They're a lot more obvious there.
Back in the day, in the 1960s, on wall television screens of the day, would have never been detectable.
Yeah.
We're fortunate to be sneaky and be able to look at these high resolution prints of the episode to see if you can spot them. And you can if you do go looking for them. After the rocking chair, the door opening and the rocking chair, Buddy looks at Rob and says,
Go explain that.
And Rob says, "It's probably just the wind. The wind blew the door open and made the chair rock."
And so what made the rocker stop rocking?
The ghost got up and left, right?
Best Rob line. Ghost got up and left. I don't know.
All along, Rob's been holding on and holding on and holding on. And all of a sudden you can see the armor is starting to crumble outside.
And I think you're right on, because in these situations, and there's some in the series also in other episodes where, Rob is like that grounding force for Buddy in all these sort of situations. Like if he's spiraling, Rob's there to sort of keep him in reality. And so the moment Rob starts believing there might be a ghost, that's when Buddy just loses it. And his face is just full on panic. I mean, he's clutching the bed. Like, it's just so he knows, like, okay, if Rob thinks this might be a ghost, we're in trouble.
So far, panic has not set in with Sally and Laura, though. And we cut to the bedroom scene, and they're just getting ready for bed. Sally's knitting, sitting on the bed. Laura's brushing her hair. But Sally remarks to Laura that the guys are acting a little bit odd or bizarre. Laura turns to talk to Sally, brushing her hair. With that, she sort of steps over in front of the mirror. But as she steps back and looks at the mirror, all of a sudden, the image of a man slowly appears in the glass, a man with a mustache looking back at her. And Laura lets out a shrieking scream, and Rob and Buddy bolt from the living room to go into the bedroom.
Run in to help. Now, can you hear this, David? I think that they loop that scream that they do in the bedroom. Like, so Laura screams and she grabs Sally, and then they cut to the living room, and Buddy and Sally hear the scream. And then they start running into the room, and as they're running in, you hear the same scream again from Laura. Like, they've just looped the audio almost. Like, listeners, take a look at that, see if you notice that same thing. It's almost like they didn't have enough, audio for that bit, and so they just kind of looped it back, which I thought was interesting.
I have not noticed that, so I will go back with everyone and listen, just like you pointed out. Laura explains that she saw this face in the mirror, and this gentleman is the actor Ed McCready. Ed did 2 episodes of the Dick Van Dyke Show. He was also a policeman in the You're Under Arrest episode. And Ed has a long list of credits that included shows that everyone's familiar with: Batman, The Green Hornet, Star Trek.
The original series in the 60s, yeah.
Right. Mission Impossible, Gunsmoke. But in later years, Murder, She Wrote, and more. And interestingly, he was also in one episode with Dick Van Dyke in Diagnosis Murder. And I haven't gone and looked up that episode yet, but I'm going to go and look that up.
I haven't either. That sounds like a treat. He was just kind of known for portraying those kind of small, memorable supporting characters across film and television. You know, one of those steady, there's a lot of these bit actors, they just become sort of a steady and familiar presence in these sort of like mid-century television. And he was one of those for sure.
The look on his face, that's just this very dry look, sort of scary look, just looking at her, right? And then vanishing. So Laura explains to Rob that she saw this face in the mirror.
Rob goes to the mirror and he's instead of seeing the mustache guy in it, he sees his own face, but because he's not ready for it, he has this huge jump scare where he jumps like, oh, you know, he sees his own face. It's just hilarious.
And Rob says, you know, Laura, maybe yours was just a reflection. And Laura says, Rob, do I have a mustache? Then he like takes her hair and puts it in front of her face to simulate, you know, what his mustache or her mustache would have looked like had her hair gone in front of his face.
So this is when Buddy kind of loses it.
Buddy just can't take it anymore. Buddy says, a ghost. The place is haunted, just like they said.
So they all start asking, what? A ghost? Haunted? Who said that? And we get this great, what I call sort of who's on first bit in the next 3 minutes, which is just like Buddy, Sally, Rob, all talking, all asking questions at the same time. Who said? Rob, I didn't. He did. It is. It isn't. You know, who said? Well, I said it. And going back and forth, trying to figure out what the heck anyone's talking about.
Very much this round robin.
Which they do amazing.
I think much of it ad-libbed as they did it, but just very natural for that troupe of actors.
For sure.
So Buddy finally says he's coming back and he's going to get all of us. He is just about ready to collapse in fear.
Well, and he also embellishes Mr. Little's description. You know, he's going to come back and he's going to murder all of it. Like, he never said that. He's already got this big story in his head. His imagination's gotten away from him.
Rob still, it was probably a hallucination. Buddy says, well, how about those lights in the other room?
What lights? Sally.
That was a loose connection. Buddy, yeah, loose connection in our heads for even being here.
Buddy leaves the room and Rob follows to stop him, but leaves Sally and Laura in the room alone. And they immediately look at each other like, we're alone. And they shriek and they go run out after him.
So they walk out to the living room. And with that, we get a far shot of the camera in which you could see the sofa bed is now closed. And Rob stops in his tracks and says, there's one thing I want to get straight before we go any further. That couch was open.
And the way he sits on it and kind of slaps it and jumps back up, you know, it's just a riot. Now, in the original draft that we have, it's not nearly as funny. Buddy comes out and he says, it's, and Laura says, Buddy, what's wrong? And he goes, our bed, and Sally says, we know it's what? And he says, it's folded up. Rob says, and her bags are packed. Good, let's get out of here. Which is like not even remotely funny compared to him. This couch was open. You know, like it can't get any better than that.
So you wonder how that bit evolved into the final form that it took.
Oh, it's just magnificent.
Buddy discovers as he looks toward the front door that their suitcases are packed. And Sally's like, this is, you know, like a bad horror movie. All we're missing is Vincent Price and the thunder and the lightning. So Sally and Buddy head for the front door and open the door to the cabin. With that, there's thunder sounds and lightning strikes. And Buddy says, yeah, all that's missing now is Vincent Price.
That would lead me to take a little bit of a pause here and just to talk about just the history of the genre of horror and just its impact on the show in this time period. So there's a couple different eras of horror movies. And now my friend Katie is very into, she writes for television, but she's also a huge cinephile. So all this information I've gotten from her over the years of how I've sort of like, you know, understood the horror genre as it goes. So in the 1930s and 40s, there was a lot of like Dracula, Frankenstein, those real true Gothic sort of settings, old novels, legends, castles types of thing. And, you know, just the classic monster era, if you will. And then in the 40s, it sort of started to blend with other genres. Like you started getting the comedies like Abbott and Costello meet Frankenstein type of thing. And the scares start to get a little softer. But then World War II hits and horror changed into science, paranoia, the atomic age, mutants, aliens, that kind of thing. Totally different. And then by the mid-50s, we get it splitting off into two directions and kind of continues on almost to the 70s this way. And the first direction it goes is sort of toward the serious psychological kind of terror horror films like Hitchcock's Rear Window or Psycho, things like that. But then there was this other avenue that branched off at this time, which was this sort of fun, stylized, sort of campy thing where they're kind of not poking fun, but it's a little bit fun and silly. And they're hearkening back to like the monsters and the Gothic castles and all that. Vincent Price is all in those, Boris Karloff, Roger Corman, all those types of things. And so at this point, sitcoms were really becoming a thing, you know, at the same time. And I think that when they're breaking off into that sort of stylized campy avenue, sitcoms really took notice and were like, oh, maybe we could actually, because it's so campy and silly, it might go good with a sitcom format because it's going to work. And so you started getting, and of course you had some TV shows like Twilight Zone that were very seriously psychologically creepy, but the sitcoms were really taking off. And so they just ran with this idea and they really started, you know, blending it into these sort of Halloween style episodes like this one where you get the sort of domestic comedy, but there's like some haunted house kind of thing going on, and you'll see it. Beverly Hillbillies did it. Gilligan's, tons of them. You'll see it over and over again. And I think it just let the sitcom kind of flirt with the macabre a little bit, and knowing audiences would just enjoy that it's a parody, but they didn't have to be very like scary about it. It didn't have to be actually genuinely scary. And of course, you'll see a bunch of references like in here when they reference Vincent Price. Audiences immediately get it because they're so familiar with all those things already.
Poor Vincent Price somehow got tied to all of this.
I know, right? Well, and then after that, you see, this was very effective because after that, you see entire series start, the Munsters, Addams Family, they start branching off into like, hey, well, let's just go full on spooky here and just do that. Right. So it really had an impact. But that just sets maybe the little context for where the show is in time and how audiences would be very, very familiar with all of these tropes and the thunder and the lightning and all that kind of thing.
Yeah, so let's talk about the thunder and lightning. You mentioned you weren't sure whether the thunder and lightning was really actual or not. So what did you discover?
When I used to watch the episode growing up, I would often think, well, is the thunder and lightning part of the gags that they're doing? They don't mention it in the episode at all in the tag scene when they're describing all of the pranks and things, like doesn't come up. So I thought, oh, I guess it's just a coincidence, I suppose. But reading through that original draft that we have, I discovered that was supposed to be a special effect that the sneaky camera was using. And it says, more thunder and lightning continue with a sound of heavy rain. We do not see the rain through the window, only hear it, meaning like it's an effect they're having. And then David, at the end of the script, Mel also mentions it, right?
Yeah, Mel reveals that, we had the effects of the thunder and lightning to make it more real, to scare you more.
Yeah, which I thought was interesting that they didn't mention that in the aired version. But I wonder how they did that effect. Was it just kind of some strobe light type of thing? I always wondered that. What was available at the time? I don't know.
Probably just flashing lights. It looks like lightning. I suspect it was all lighting cues and sound effects.
Yeah, it was very cool.
Buddy and Sally have headed for the door, but now they're frozen, and we hear a knock coming from the bedroom door. And this is a classic line. The door slowly opens and Sally sort of tips her head and says, Vincent? I will tell you, in my household with my kids, when they were young watching the show, that used to be something that we would quote.
I love that.
We'd be watching some other show at a very different time in the house, and you'd hear the creak of a door. And my daughter would look at me and say, Vincent?
I love that. Oh, my God, that's terrific.
Everybody knew the inside joke, exactly what we're talking about. And despite the fact that was probably 30 some years ago, I'm sure if I said that to my daughter today, she would know exactly what I'm talking about.
I can tell you I'm probably her age and I would remember that, I'm sure. That's so sweet. So Rob's, pretending to be brave here. Again, like you said, he's crumbling bit by bit as the episode goes on. And he says, well, he takes kind of a look into the room. Well, there's nothing to worry about. There's nobody in there. It's empty. And then Buddy says, well, then nobody knocked? Sally says, that's something to worry about, which I think is really, really good delivery of that.
So Rob decides that he's going to call for the Jeep, and they move like as a cluster of four, sort of like the end of the Mary Tyler Moore Show.
Yes, I was going to say that same thing. Yeah, where they all sort of cuddle together and walk through the office.
They move as a group toward the phone on the table behind the couch.
They're not going to let each other go. This is like friendship. You really get to see their deep friendships here. Like I noticed in the scene when they run in on Robin or on Laura and Sally in the bedroom when the ghost in the mirror appears, that the way Buddy kind of grabs Sally and holds onto her for dear life. I mean, it's just so revealing of just like, oh, they have a deep, deep friendship by this point in the show. So both as actors and as characters.
As he approaches the table with the phone, Rob picks up not the receiver, but the entire phone. And they're like, Rob. So he puts the phone back down, picks it up. The line is dead. And I think Sally says, isn't it always?
Isn't it always?
Something like that. So Rob says, all right, well, we're going to have to walk it.
Yep.
So they all sort of, again, as a group, approach the door. And there's more thunder and lightning, as if to say, hold it right there. Yeah. You're not going anywhere.
Which, now that we know it was one of their special effects in the sneaky camera, makes sense now that they could time that where it would make, the most sense to whatever they were trying to, the story they were kind of trying to make, which makes so much sense. Yeah.
So Buddy decides he's going to make a big announcement. And whoever you are, whatever you are, if you want us out of here, we'll go right after it stops raining. I promise. And with that, kaboom, another boom of thunder. And he says, you're welcome.
I love how he's got his hat to his chest, like he's just like burying this announcement. So the next scene, and maybe you agree with this, David, I would say is the most iconic scene of the episode. It kind of begins Act 3, and we open up on an image that if you show any Dick Van Dyke Show fan this image, they will be like, oh yeah, they know exactly what it's from. It just says so many things with such a small image, but they're all lined up on the fold-away couch, which somehow they unfolded, by the way, but they were brave enough to unfold
Opened it back up again.
Yeah.
Yep.
Under the covers, all terrified. And so they all have sort of the blankets up to their necks, with their hands over it like little kids, and they're all, stuck together in this couch. It fits just the four of them just perfectly,
Rob says, is anybody asleep? And Buddy says, are you nuts? Sally says, who can sleep? Laura, I am fast awake.
Buddy says, my heart's pounding so hard it's going to knock the covers off.
I love Laura's fast awake line, not in the draft script. So somebody came up with that as the script evolved.
Which is a great line.
Rob trying to reassure everyone it's been over 2 hours now and nothing strange or unusual has happened. Sally says, no. What do you call 4 grown people sleeping in the same bed with their clothes on?
And then they pull down the covers and reveal they're all fully clothed, next to each other.
Rob suggests they start acting like adults and that the girls go back into the bedroom.
The girls are too scared. They're like, no, we're not going back. And then Buddy says, well, wait a minute. Let's just stay together. It's comfy like this. He's just very scared.
As Rob attempts to summarize about the weird things that have been happening, the sofa bed starts to close up on them on their own, and they all scramble to get out of the bed before it closes.
I love how they choreographed it. The way Rob sort of ends sitting on top of it and falls down into it. I mean, it's just amazing. That and the special effect is amazing.
They run across the room, and Buddy says, look at that, a man-eating bed. Maury told me a story once, chatting with him about this episode and about the man-eating bed. Let's listen to his recollection about that scene.
I damn near got killed. You remember when I got on the bed and the thing curled up? Well, this schmuck went and pressed the wrong button, and the thing starts to curl up on me, and I thought I'd been caught in there. I could have gotten killed.
That is so fun.
To think that some schmuck pressed the wrong button and almost killed Maury, and he still remembered it. I think we did that interview a couple of years before Maury passed. He still remembered that from some 30 years before.
That is wild. That's so cool. Well, and things start to really rev up here scary-wise, let me just say. It's the final act of the episode. Things are starting happening closer and closer together, and the things that are happening are scarier and scarier, and you just feel this intense kind of momentum pick up.
In the midst of this chaos going on, Buddy runs across the room toward the closet to grab his suitcase to try to get away. And Rob and Sally and Laura are sort of still all chatting with that. And with that closet door that was locked earlier in the episode suddenly opens and grabs Buddy and pulls him inside.
Yeah, like some sort of arm just kind of comes out. Now, who do you think that hooded actor was, David? Because you can see someone sort of wearing like a black hood in there, and I wondered if it was Edward or if it was, I don't know who it was, but I wondered if it was him because it looks like he's already wearing a black turtleneck when he's in the other scenes with the mustache. So I wondered if they just gave him a little hood and then he did the same thing because his arm's wearing a black shirt, He was already kind of dressed for it, maybe.
I'm thinking, yeah, it's probably McCready.
Yeah.
I have a publicity still that shows Laura being pulled in, but again, you can't see the face of it there. Yeah. But I'll go back and look and see if there's any hints to see if we can match up maybe the shirt of McCready or something.
Yeah.
That's fun. The remaining 3 are discussing that they want to get out, and Rob calls to Buddy to have them gather their things, only now to discover Buddy's gone.
Laura says, maybe he's outside. Rob says, alone?
Yeah, Sally suggests maybe he's in the closet. And Rob goes over and attempts to open the closet, but he pulls and nope, it's locked. With that, there's more knocking on the bedroom door.
This bedroom door, man, is spooky. So Rob again tries to get brave. I guess I'll go look in the bedroom then, kind of thing. Not without us. And they follow him in there.
Rob approaches the bedroom, closely followed by Laura and Sally, and they enter the bedroom, trying to see is Buddy in there somehow. Sally lags subtly behind, just enough so that all of a sudden, dun 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 dun, that music starts. And all of a sudden she has that look on her face. And now Sally is missing.
And it is the weirdest shot of the episode because the camera is basically telegraphing at us that there's some menacing thing coming from the fourth wall, kind of like coming from the audience toward her. Because I guess in your head, you're like, okay, there would be a wall there. There's maybe another closet. But what would have been there? Another closet? They don't talk about it, Are they just somebody coming out of the wall? It's kind of odd. But it's a very, very strange shot that they had to do. But really, there's no other way they could do it because Buddy leaves through the closet. the bedroom doesn't go anywhere. And then Laura leaves through, we'll see, in the front door. So it's like the only other place there is to sort of just make up something in the fourth wall, kind of.
And in the draft script, there's actually no mention of the scene where Sally is taken away. So
I didn't see that.
Yeah. So I think they had to come up with a way for Sally to get apprehended and disappear as well.
So is she in the whole rest of the episode?
Sally?
In the draft? Yeah.
Oh, no, she disappears, but they don't explain. They don't explain how she.
Gotcha. They came up with that later. I see. That makes sense.
Correct. In the midst of going into the bedroom, Laura turns to talk to Sally, only discovered now that Sally's missing. And she says, Rob, Sally's gone.
Her shrieks are so great, Somehow she can be funny and terrified at the same time, So they come back in the living room. They're looking around for him. Their buddy, Sally, hey, gang, and then they see all their bags sort of packed near the door. And Laura says, oh, look, just their luggage left. They're like, oh. Like the remains, And then Rob says, well, the only place they can be is that locked closet door that they keep referencing. And so he's like, I'm going to go heave on it and see if I can get it open, kind of thing.
So they approach the closet for Rob to try to open it again.
And by the way, any bit with Rob and a locked door, gonna be funny. Just I'm thinking of like Never Bathe on Sunday, or the maybe blonde hair brunette. There's always he can take an object and just here open this, try to get this door open. He's just gonna run with it.
Concerned for Laura's safety, Rob tells Laura to stand back a little. Laura steps back just enough, and Rob gives a real heave the door, but to no avail. But as he's trying to open that closet, the door of the cabin opens and Laura is whisked away.
All silently, by the way. None of them seem to scream, which of course fits well, making sure no one knows that they've left, but it doesn't quite make a ton of sense. But
I do think we should also, though, point out the music that Hagen wrote. The background music here is just phenomenal.
It really is.
Accompany the scenes and the mood and the terror and the fright of the whole thing, right? Sort of heart pounding at certain times.
Yeah.
Dum, 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 dum.
I can hear that music in my head from that episode. If you tell me the scene in the episode, I can hear the exact musical cues that are happening. Like it's just, it's so good. It's so completely woven into the story. You almost can't have one without the other.
In the script, the draft version, Laura is actually pulled back into the bedroom, not out the front door. So they must have figured out that because they were over by the closet, how are they going to get her out of the bedroom door? And they ended up using the front door of the cabin.
But Rob reaches back to see, I think he's asked Laura for a hairpin or something to open the door, and she's gone. And now, and his reaction is just, oh no. And just, that's it. He's alone now. He's by himself. He's really cooked.
Now he's talking to himself.
Yes, which he does well.
Honey, Sally, buddy, pause, beat, mama.
That and the teddy bear line of buddies, it just has like they're little boys, it's so cute.
That mama line, not in the original draft. So I suspect just the improv of that whole scene going on is where Dick came up with that.
Now, I feel like he gets a little courageous here. I feel like he has to. Like, his wife is gone. His friends are gone. There's a ghost. He's just got to kind of man up and start talking to whatever entity is causing all this mayhem and trying to get it figured out. Because it's like he has no choice. He's all alone at this point. So he kind of gets some courage.
So he's talking out loud, probably trying to reassure himself.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Yeah, that too.
To whoever might be listening. At this point, the chair starts rocking on his own, and Rob talks to it. If you return my wife and my friends, I'll go in peace. Rob sort of senses something behind him, and he turns to see in the glass on the door the image of that mustache man on the closet door.
And the music is just really kicking here.
And he pleads with the ghost, we'll call him, right, to return his wife and his friends so they can leave. And with that, the image of the ghost fades away and disappears. Just a few seconds elapse, and
Mel appears in the mirror or the window of the closet instead. And he says, "Scream, you're on sneaky camera."
And Rob says, "Mel, you don't know what happened. Buddy, Sally, Laura, they're all gone. This place is haunted, Mel."
This chair's rocking.
As he's saying it, suddenly it hits him.
"What are you doing in a mirror?"
"I just told you, you're on sneaky camera." "What? Sneaky camera? What happened to everyone?" Mel says, "Don't worry, they're safe. They're right here with me."
And Rob says, "You mean you've been filming all this?" And the mustache man kind of comes up with the camera in the window filming.
"Come out of there, Mel."
Starts trying to open the door.
His next line, "I'm insane."
I think Mel says, "Are you angry?"
And he says, "We're still filming." And Rob I don't know if you could hear this line, save some film for the murder.
This was the first time I've ever caught that line, was researching for this episode. Never had caught it before.
Now, we do have to reveal some other little secret behind the scenes stuff at this point. In the original draft, the door actually opens, and out of there comes Mel and the cameraman, the mustached man.
Mm-hmm. I think Rob says, sneaky camera? And he says, it's the new show Alan Brady brought you up here to work on. Rob says, you mean this whole thing was a setup? And Laura, who's, I guess, has exited the door as well, says, Rob, they were shooting film through two-way mirrors. I feel so silly.
And Mel says, that's the idea. Every week we put people in a weird situation and just film the fun. Well, Rob, what do you think?
He says, I think you should be arrested. You scared Buddy half to death.
Buddy half to death, right? Not him. Mel says, well, that was a labor of love.
And Rob says, actually, you were lucky. That thunderstorm came along just in time or we'd have been out of here.
So Mel says, turn off that storm. That's what we were talking about early, about turn off the thunder lightning.
Which would be cool because at that point, the sound effect would have stopped and it would have been really fun.
Everybody supposedly laughs. So Mel says, well, what do you think of our new show? And Rob says, isn't it a steal from Candid Camera? And he says, well, that's where Ellen got the idea. Well, with that, a mustache ghost comes out of the back room, right out of the closet. Mm-hmm. And Laura says, looking at this gentleman, well, I must say you produced it beautifully, pointing to this mustache ghost, different than the cameraman.
Yes, yes.
That fellow was great, she says. And Mel says, well, he should be. He was our guest star and the host of the series, to which Rob says, guest star. And then the man removes his beard and his mask and says, yes, you said all it needed was Vincent Price. Here I am.
Can you imagine?
And it was supposed to be Vincent Price.
I mean, that would have been amazing.
I don't know why in the end. Clearly, they wrote it to include him.
Yeah.
They also talk about they meet Vincent Price and they buy art from him, and then the scene sort of closes. Apparently, Vincent Price was involved in selling pieces of art from very inexpensive to very expensive, and he got known to that. I actually saw a YouTube clip of him talking about some art exhibition where they were showcasing different pieces. So it sounds to me as though in that time, he was very important in the art field in trying to promote art and the sale of art for people both wealthy and not so wealthy to be able to own a piece of art.
Very cool.
But I do think the fact that Vincent Price could have been in this episode would have been just great fun.
I mean, it would have been fantastic. Again, another Brady Bunch reference. He was in an episode of the Brady Bunch when they had some sort of like tiki thing or something. He was a creepy guy who worked there. You know, if it can work there, it could work here.
They certainly laid the foundation all along the way, right? All we need is Vincent Price. It's a horror movie. Vincent, Sally's line.
That really would have been the feather in the cap, you know?
In a way, it's almost better because were we thinking Vincent Price was going to appear? Actually, the guy, Ed McCready, with the camera, sort of looked like Vincent Price, right? A receding hairline and the mustache.
Yeah.
Maybe they just decided in the end.
Allude to him a little bit, yeah.
Vincent was supposed to do it, and in the end, they couldn't do it, so they had to drop back and punt and figure out how the storyline would go.
So that scene dissolves, and we are now again in the tag scene of the episode, which is they're all sitting in the living room of the cabin. Mel's standing center. They're all kind of having coffee or tea.
And this is where, if Alan would have been in the scene, this is where he would have appeared.
Yes, that's right. I remember that now.
If you look at the direction in the script, it says Alan, Mel, blah, 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 are all seated there in the cabin.
Which does make sense because where the heck is he then? You know, in the scene, in how it aired. Like, where is the guy? He's just in his room hanging out.
He was there organizing the show, but we never saw him the whole time.
That's so strange.
So maybe with AI someday, somebody will put Alan in the rocking chair or something. Or Carl in the rocking chair so we can have him be part of the final scene.
For sure. So in the tag scene, we get we get a little more explanation of a sort of candid camera type thing. You know, Rob says something like, well, you know, I can't believe you're stealing this idea from another show. And they don't specifically say candid camera. In the draft of the script we have, they actually do mention it by name. Isn't it a steal of candid camera? But they chose not to mention that in the aired version. You know, Mel says, well, we stole from one of the best, you know, kind of thing. And at this point, candid camera's been around for a long time, so it very well established in the, you know, pop culture vernacular where everyone knows what it is. So you don't even have to say it. They know what they're referring to.
Right. Mel remarks, I can't wait to develop the film on Buddy. He was scared to death. And Buddy says, I wasn't scared. And Sally says, how come you're still holding my hand?
Rob says, easy. He has no courage.
And Laura, He says, you were the biggest chicken of us all.
You did some pretty good cooking there yourself.
So Rob says to Mel, how did you do that thing with the fire? And Mel sort of plays a little dumb and says, what fire? With this, you can see Buddy again is just still a little bit out of sorts. And as they're talking, Buddy gets up, he's nervous, and he heads out the door toward the car.
This is like his only escape usually, just get his bags and take a hike.
With that, Mel sort of gets this funny smile on his face and says, as long as there's a possibility of driving him, Buddy, crazy, I will never tell.
It's a fantastic ending. I mean, this was just such a fun. There's some creepy episodes of the series, but I think this one is the classic kind of Halloween episode. We have Long Day's Journey, and we have or Long Night's Journey, and we have Uni Oomph, and we have the Walnuts episode. So we have a few that are creepy, but this one I think is really the true classic Halloween episode. I know I always watched it on Halloween growing up, and strangely, the series has like one Christmas episode, but they have a whole bunch of spooky ones, which I find kind of interesting. But this one was just that classic horror camp. It was so fun. Special effects, which we don't ever really see on the show, maybe other than the walnuts falling out of the closet. And then, of course, we get to see this really deep friendship that this gang all has, that they've been now in, and we get to see the amazing writing of we're in the 4th season and how Persky and Denoff wrote these characters so authentic and so rich. We know how they're all going to act in these situations, and they write it perfectly. And we get to see Buddy being a chicken, which is his usual go-to, and Rob being the sort of like waffling between like brave and like not so brave and not so brave, and it's just you can just really see that deep friendship of them. Like they're truly terrified, and they're really there for each other, which is great. And then, of course, you get the great twist at the end where surprise ending, if this is the first time you've ever seen the episode, which I don't know about you, David, but it's probably my 10,000th time. But still was fun the first time.
Fans really love this show. They cite lines from the show. If you're a fan of the show and someone cites a line, you know exactly what they're talking about.
Definitely.
We hope you've enjoyed our look back today at the ghost of a Chantz, or the ghost of a Miss Chantz.
And if you'd like to be notified when our new episodes are released, just feel free to subscribe to our Tripping Over the Ottoman YouTube channel, and you'll get notified. Our podcast is also available on all the major streaming platforms, so you can find us there as well.
And always remember, we're a community, so we value your comments, your questions, your contributions to the discussion about our episodes. So feel free to leave us some feedback on the channel or send an email to trippingovertheottoman@gmail.com. And we always like to see that subject of Box 7030 because we know it's a comment from some of our listeners. For today, I am David.
And I'm Abby. And thanks for tripping over the Ottoman with us. We'll see you next time.